Hi, and welcome to Spooky Hours. My name's David Saunderson. Today we're joined, a bit of a special one today. I've got a new co-host from Spooky Hours, Rachel Elizabeth. How are you, Rachel?
I'm okay, thank you. I'm battling through a cold and cough, but I'm okay.
I think you and everyone else in the
I
British
know.
Isles are doing the same thing, and
Yes.
so we're going to be doing this as a co-hosting type thing. It's the first time I've kind of done this on the Spooky Isles podcast, but hopefully it'll bring in a little bit of a different perspective to the spookiness. Not only having someone of the feminine persuasion, but also someone from the north of England. So that would be that'll bring something a little bit different to it. Now we are very privileged to have with us a guest today. We're actually talking to Chicago. It's 6 o'clock, or not, it's 6 o'clock here in London, and in America, where Dale Kaczmarek is 12 o'clock. So the day's only just begun for you, Dale. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Well, that's good to know. Now, for those that don't know, Dale Kaczmarek is a veteran paranormal investigator, author, and president of the Ghost Research Society. He's got nearly 50 years of experience exploring hauntings, ghost photography, EVP recordings, all sorts of spooky things. He's investigated places all over the world, including here in the UK. So that's why we're talking to him today. But we're really interested in trying to uncover some of his most compelling encounters, his experience in investigating some of those haunted sites and getting some insights into what he's discovered over the last 50 years. Now, Dale, I'm going to start it with the first question I think I would want to ask you is, do you believe in ghosts?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's just more than I believe in ghosts. I think it's actually the evidence I've uncovered during investigations, EVP sessions, videos, still photography, personal experiences, equipment fluctuations, things of that nature. So you could just say, yeah, I believe in ghosts, but I believe I have a lot of evidence to back up my belief that things survive after you die.
Okay. Now, not wanting to put you, well, I'll put you on the spot, and it's very difficult to ask this question because obviously I'd say, well, you've got lots of evidence. I think what most people would agree, it's never really agreed on what the evidence needs to be to prove that. So what do you base your beliefs on? What is it? Is it EVPs? Is it photographs? What is it that you'll say that's the evidence that points to the paranormal?
Well, my forte has always been in spirit photography. I wrote a book on spirit photography, and when I first started out, I was using a 35 millimeter camera. I was using Polaroid film, so it's kind of old school now. I mean, now everybody uses digital, but I think what I used to use a lot when I was investigating was infrared film. And
Yeah.
we used black and white infrared film, and we got some pretty amazing pictures of things that were not there at the time that we shot those images, and later showed up on the negative. And that's very interesting too, because a negative is something that cannot be manipulated. Once you take a picture on a negative, it's there, okay, and something you can hold in your hand, quite different from a digital, camera that's basically just a bunch of ones and zeros and so forth. But I think that's what really got me to what I believe was more concrete evidence, was something that we took pictures of, and in many cases we coupled them with other cameras. We might have, say, one camera with infrared film, one camera with high-speed film, and taking the same area at the same time, and then snapping pictures and then reviewing them later to see if something showed up only on the infrared and not on the high speed, taken at the very same time. So to me, that's pretty amazing. In my opinion, one of my proofs that things exist that we can't see all the time. Now, there's other things too. I mean, video obviously is great, because when I first started out, they didn't have any night shot cameras. Now you can go and pretty much record in total darkness. And even though they're not really infrared, they're more like near infrared cameras. Video was always good too. And we have collected a mass of literally shadow figures, moving shadow figures, and full bodied apparitions actually on cameras and video, which I think is pretty neat, pretty amazing.
Okay. So we've got very technical into the first aspect of this thing, which it's great, and it's showing people that you've got the experience about this. How did you get to this point? Like I'm looking through your bio. You started in about 1975. You must have been a much younger man than you are now when you did that. What was it that drew you into this more scientific way of ghost hunting, paranormal investigation?
Um, well, I think it was a lot of different things. I mean, first of all, I think partly the reason I got involved, if I can back up just a second, is my parents were telling me ghost stories when I was a youngster. And that's really what kind of got me started. There was some very famous ghost stories here in Chicago that later on, as I grew older, I wanted to see if those stories were simply urban legends or old wives' tales or just not true at all. And then eventually I decided to kind of put together a group, eventually a bunch of like-minded individuals who had the same interest as I did. And again, as I said, we just started up with very basic equipment. Um, Cassette tape recorders, 35 millimeter cameras. In fact, my very first EMF device was a compass. So you can see how rudimentary that was back then. And then later on, as the technology started to catch up, we were able to adapt certain pieces of equipment to be used for quote unquote ghost hunting, but they actually had other purposes. And then now, as you to the right now, you basically have a lot of groups, a lot of individuals who build stuff specifically for the express purpose of ghost hunting.
Rachel, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you have a favourite specific piece of equipment that you like to use more than others, or does it kind of depend on what type of investigation you're doing?
Yes, basically, we always try to document things as best as we can, so we're using multiple pieces of equipment. One of my favorite EMF devices is the tri-field natural EM meter. It's a device that you can bring into a building or an apartment or whatever, and it's not going to pick up any background radiation. It's not going to pick up any, AC fields. It's given off by light switches, sockets. So if the device begins to go off, there's something that is not naturally occurring. That's going to later determine what it is. And of course, I love certain pieces of equipment that we do use. We use one called the Phasma box. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's actually an app, but we get some really great full sentences in response to questions we've asked. And of course, some of the digital recorders, digital cameras, night shot cameras. Those are kind of my favorite pieces of equipment to use investigations. But again, we kind of tailor our equipment to where we're at. If we're going to be doing something at night, something broad daylight, we always try to be there at the time that most of the phenomena seems to occur. So if somebody gives us a call and we go to their house or their castle or something like that or whatever, why would we go there at 2:00 in the afternoon or 2:00 in the morning when that's not when the phenomena is going on. So you don't have to be there in the middle of the night in a spooky old dark building to investigate. We just try to be there when people report what's going on.
Yeah.
Sorry, Rachel. I was going to say, I find it interesting because I've been reading a lot of your stuff, and I mean, I think you've been a little bit dismissive of some of the modern apps, which I probably agree with. When you say these apps, can you maybe talk a little bit through them? Because you've said in the past that you think that some of them are near enough toys that tell you anything that you want to hear.
Well, I mean, the apps. I was a very big skeptic of the apps, and I still am to most of them. I mean, some of them. Like the Ghost Radar. I don't know if you've ever seen that device, that app, but basically it takes your cell phone and it makes your cell phone into a radar screen, and it's going to go.
I think I have tried doing that, and I didn't have much fun with it. Yeah.
I mean, basically, your device. I mean, your phone has no, way to pick up, something in the environment. Even some like ghost hunting tools, there's one called Ghost Hunting Tools, which actually wants to make your cell phone into an EMF device. And your cell phone is not picking up EMF. Some of these are random generators of words. Some are random generated of images. I've actually seen. There's one called Imani, and what it does is as you ask a question during your EVP, it cycles through a bunch of faces, and it pops on a face. And if the face is smiling, then they say, well, the ghost is happy. If it's a frown, they say the ghost is, and it's just very random stuff. So some of those are really kind of off the wall. Now, the one we use, the Phasma box, I mean, it's a very great device. I mean, I was very skeptical about it until we began to ask questions, and not just a word would come through. I mean, an entire sentence would come through. And we did all different types of tests to make sure we weren't picking up random stuff from the internet or from Wi-Fi or whatever. We even turned off the microphone on our tablet, so we weren't broadcasting the questions like over the network or something, and we were still getting full sentences, direct responses. Not all the time, but I mean very, very consistent, and it really amazed me. There's many, many examples on my website, ghostresearch.org. You can go to what's called the GRS investigations, and you can see some of these responses that we've gotten, and it's truly amazing.
Okay. Just wondering, we'll sort of go back to 1975, because I think this is interesting, because we don't talk to many people nowadays who can actually say they were doing this stuff before some of these big TV shows, or the way that has affected or infected the way we do ghost hunting. What do you miss about the olden days? And that's wrong to say olden days, because I was born in 1975, so I'm just saying that. But what do you miss about the days before you could, some of this TV, paranormal reality TV shows change the scene?
Well, I think it was a lot less technical back then. You were using stuff like I said, cassette tape recorders, then eventually digital recorders. I mean, they didn't have a lot of the high tech gear, so to speak, that we have today. So it was a lot less. I guess the way I would categorize it, it was easier back then, perhaps, to investigate than it is now, because you almost have to take a course on how these devices work. I mean, you have to read the instruction manual, and you go through this and that. Tools are good, but I always said that the number one tool is your own body, because you can hear things, you can feel things, you can see things, you can smell things sometimes. And in some cases, we would actually bring along animals, cats and dogs, along with us, and they are very highly susceptible to picking up phenomena. Cats will fly out of the room, they'll hiss, they'll spit, actually back, dogs will just go crazy. And so I think, I guess the turning point pretty much, for a lot of this equipment probably happened in the year 1984. And that's when Ghostbusters came out. And everybody was seeing all these Ghostbusters, Dan Aykroyd and everybody, with these high-tech tools and, looking for ghosts and, and so forth. And that really, I think, brought a lot of people sort of out of the closet. And people before that time really had a hard time talking about whether or not their place was haunted.
Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was reading one interview that you did where you referred to yourself as a paranormal researcher and not a ghost hunter. So I was just wondering if sort of how you differentiate between those two titles.
Well, I always said that, the term ghost hunter to me was like I was out there with a gun hunting ghosts, track them down and capture them and everything like that.
Yeah,
And
like a Ghostbuster.
like the Ghostbusters, right? I don't have any of that type of equipment. I don't have no nuclear backpacks. I don't trap in energy fields and containment. That stuff doesn't exist. It's basically kind of a farce on the field. But it was a fanciful way of showing that there was a humorous side to ghosts. But I prefer something like paranormal researcher or psychic investigator or something like that because it's not just ghosts that we always investigate. I mean, we're involved with poltergeist cases, which are not even at all related, we believe, to spirits. They're related to an adolescent going through puberty that has pent up emotions. That the phenomena can be like psychokinesis, mind over matter, movements of objects, et cetera, et cetera. So when we say psychic investigator, that's more all-encompassing rather than just say ghost hunter.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that because, I mean, I think one of your this was going to be the next question I was going to ask anyway about your influences. Now, I know that the most famous ghost hunter of all time, Harry Price, is one of your influences, and you've actually been here in England and looked at a lot of his old haunts, as it were.
Oh, absolutely. My friend Paul Adams, who I'm sure that you're friends with, had taken me and a friend that came along with us to all the Harry Price places. I mean, all the laboratories that he did his work at, the house that he died in, the cemetery he's buried in. We actually got to see a couple of chairs that he donated in a church that we actually got to sit on and actually got plaques donated by Harry Price. Harry Price was, again, one of what I would call old school ghost hunters. I mean, basically, he had stuff like baby powder we sprinkle on the floor. He would have strings attached to doorknob to see if the ghost would break the door of string. He would have sort of rudimentary cameras. He had bells and so forth and things of that nature. And there's a very famous photograph of Harry Price, sitting with all his ghost hunting gear around him.
Yeah.
And it's quite extensive. But again, it's state of the art for back then. Okay, but today nobody uses that kind of stuff, unfortunately, and I think that's what I kind of miss too, because it's those early ghost hunters like Harry Price, like Hans Holzer here in the United States, and others, where I really got my feel for getting into this field because watching them, reading their books, and so forth, and Hans Holzer, I mean, on a 60-some books or something he wrote. I mean, it's a lifetime of books just there.
Yeah, no, I've only read one of his books, and that was when he came to Ireland. So, so we'll just go to you've been to Britain a couple of times, or I think 3 times from what you told me. You were here in the 1980s. You came back in the early 2000s, and you're back here a couple of years ago. I remember seeing some pictures of you online with Paul Adams, who's a friend of the Spooky Owls. What were some of your highlights when you came here? Spooky wise, I'm sure there was lots of other things you saw, but from a spooky point of view, what did you remember?
Well, some of the very famous castles. I mean, I love going in castles. One that comes to mind was Barry Pomeroy Castle.
That's in Devon. So people know. Yep.
And we first saw that in 1985 with I was with a tour that was being led by Tom Parrott, who was chairman of the Ghost Club at the time. We subsequently became kind of pen pals. This was before the internet, so we were just writing. But it got the message across. And that when I first there in 1985, we couldn't get in because there was scaffolding and they were doing some repair work. But I was there with 2 other people. It was a very small group. We took like 2 weeks touring all places around England. And it was one of the creepiest places that gave me the creepy vibes. And I always wanted to return back. So a few years ago, Paul invited me to come to England, and we went there, and it was open. And we did a little mini investigation in there. We did some EVPs. We didn't really get anything, unfortunately, but the story is really kind of really crazy about two sisters, that were in love with the same one gentleman, and one was locked in. They were almost like twins or something, and they see her ghost on the ramparts, kind of beckoning people in. I mean, I always thought that was just a cool thing to see. We didn't see anything, unfortunately. And it was a wishing tree. I don't know if it's still there. They say if you walk around the tree counterclockwise so many times, and something's supposed to happen. Of course, when we were there in '85, the tree was not what it is today. It's like halfway washed down the hill, so you really couldn't test that theory. But I mean, the Tower of London was another great place that, I mean, if I was living in London, I'd be there literally every weekend. So much history, so many ghost stories, so many, tragedies and beheadings, and it's just an amazing place. I'm
How does it compare? How does it compare? Sorry, how does it compare to the American states or the American sites that you're obviously used to? There's got to be places like in Chicago that are famous. I'm sort of thinking of sort of your different ones like Bachelor's Grove or Resurrection Mary, different places that you've investigated. How do they compare?
Well, I mean, the history in England goes much, much further back than here in the United States. I mean, the earliest settlements here in the United States probably were the 1620s or something, maybe the Vikings before that or something. But, I mean, just look at the amount of years and vintage, as I call them, happens here in the UK. I mean, you got ones going back to the 10th century, even before that. It's just an amazing, and just to have so many years of activity taking place there, and centuries actually, not just years, as compared to here in the United States. I mean, some of these only go back to, say, the late 1960s. I mean, there are some maybe in the New England states that go back a little bit further. But that, I think, has a lot to do with the phenomenon going on there. And that's one thing I always found fascinating when I was talking to people here in the UK. You could go into any pub, literally, and they pretty much had a ghost story. And they'd be more than happy to talk to you about it, show you around and everything. Here in the United States, it's kind of different. You go into somebody saying to a pub or to a bar and you say, "Show me your ghost," they say, "You had a few too many," or something. But I mean, it's not the same feel. And that's why I love coming back over and over again. I've been to England, I've been to Wales, I've been to Scotland. Never been to Ireland yet, but
Rachel?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, considering how long you've been doing the paranormal research, that I also read in an interview that you said that you're always sort of hoping to get that, aha, this is the evidence that's going to blow everything wide open. Would you say you've had quite a lot of those types of instances, or are you still waiting for that one that will really sort of blow everyone's minds?
Well, I've had some excellent examples that have happened to me. Now, I've seen literally dozens of what I believe to be ghosts, mostly shadow figures that we've seen in locations. We've actually recorded shadow figures. There was, if you bear with me, I'll give you a quick example here. We were in a place called Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia. It's a 256,000 square foot building. It's huge.
Wow.
And there was one area where there was we've been there several times, and we've been different tour guides, and they always tell the same story. There was a woman named, a patient named Ruth, that did not like members of the opposite sex. So if you were a gentleman, she would throw her food at that, throw objects, curse and everything. So we were investigating just a few, maybe 20 feet away from where this supposedly happened. And there's some isolation cells where they used to put unruly patients. And I was there with 3 female investigators at the time. So that's very important. I was the only male investigator. Suddenly, my left arm felt like it had been thrust into a deep freeze. I mean, goosebumps, hair standing only on one side of my body. And then, literally, to put it mildly, some icy cold hand, it felt like, it grabbed my buttocks. And we have a video of this on the website, on our investigations here on the Trans-Allegheny, and you can actually see I'll suddenly go, oh, what was that? And the 3 females that were there, they felt no cold, no change in temperature, no draft. And it's interesting because they were females, and I was the intruder, I was the male. So we were doing a quick EVP session there. I just asked the question, do you want us to leave or do you want me to leave? And it said, you, meaning me. So we left, not that we were scared, but sometimes when we're doing investigations, I believe that sometimes we kind of intrude upon a spirit's place and they don't want you there, so we just move on to someplace else. We weren't bothered. But I thought that was a pretty interesting piece of evidence that happened to me personally. I mean, I've been poked in the back a couple of times. I've had my hair played with. I've been touched. But I've seen a lot of shadow figures, and we recorded several of these. The same location, very quick story. There was a hallway. We had cameras down, night shot cameras. And there was a big day room for like visitors to visit with patients, and on the other side were all patients' rooms. And I just kind of announced out of into the air. I just said, "Come across the hallway. There are family waiting for you in the day room to visit with you." And no sooner I had said that, shadow darted across the hallway from one of the rooms into the day room. Everybody saw it. Unfortunately, the cameras were facing the wrong direction. But so you got everybody's reaction like, wow. So, yeah, I mean, sometimes I think ghosts kind of know that you're filming them, you're taping them, and they like to play games.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, David, when you said before about if you ask a ghost, do you want us to leave? And if they say yes, you will. I know there's like quite a few ghost hunting shows that I watch. They'll try and rile up the ghosts or the entities to try and get stuff to happen, say if not much is going on. Is that something you've ever done or would ever do, or do you just kind of go in and let things happen as and when they happen?
Yeah, I guess the term that you're probably using is provoking. We don't provoke ghosts. I mean, we don't call them names. We don't belittle them, because if they are a surviving personality, which we believe that, at least our team believes that they probably are some sort of surviving personality that hasn't moved from this side to the other side. We don't want to belittle them. So we would just talk to them like I'm talking to you all, and try to elicit a response. I see a lot of these shows on TV, and I won't mention them because I get enough hate mail as I already do, because I've kind of transgressed upon some of these shows. But they do a lot of that, unfortunately, and they think it works for them. Well, it may, in fact, work, but why would you, if you were a ghost wandering around for some reason and you couldn't move on the other side, would you like a bunch of strangers coming in and calling you names and just making you feel terrible? I would never do that. I've never done that, and I'll never do that.
I always think it's like, would you like someone talking like that to your granny?
Yeah.
like there's someone's relative and you're having a go at them. And I think it's a bit weak, and it's mostly just sort of for theatrics for the television, really. So the idea that somehow I'd be, if I was a ghost, I'd be like, well, I'm not going to talk to you now at all then, am I? I'm going to make your life really bad treatment. And boring. So how would you define the different types of ghosts? Because you've used the word shadow people, shadow figures, and that's something in the recent week. We've just had a TV show here in Britain called Uncanny, and their episode was about the Shadow Man. So it's people are talking about it. It's reasonably I would say almost a new term, because I don't remember it being used as a kid. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I believe that ghosts can appear in various guises. They don't always appear as we do. To actually see a full-bodied apparition that looks like us is going to be a rarity. Sometimes you'll see a semi-transparent form. Sometimes you'll see a mist or a fog. Sometimes you might see simply a ball of light or a partial figure. In some cases, you'll see what are termed shadow images or dark images that seem to have that seem to resemble a human, but they're very fleeting in some cases. There are some that believe that shadow people are a negativity, something negative, something demonic, and I hate that word demonic. You hear too much of it on these TV shows. I've never come across anything demonic in any of my work. Not saying it doesn't exist, I just haven't come across any of it. So I think when you have something showing up in a different form, that's either the form that the spirit wants to appear in, or perhaps that all they can appear as in a certain time. Because the idea of something showing up in physical form has to take a tremendous amount of energy for that to take place. It's not just simply an EVP, a disembodied voice, a smell, a cold spot, something like that, or touch. To show up as we do has to take a tremendous amount of energy, and that's why I don't think too many people have had the privilege of actually seeing a ghost. I've just been around so many places. Eventually it's just the law of averages. I'm eventually going to run into something, and I'm really happy that I have. And in many cases, we were able to capture those images, and in fact, those video of those actual beings.
I find it interesting just to go to the point where you said that you were talking about demons, because that's a very big thing that comes out of America, and you see it on all the shows that everything's demonic. And for all these years, like 50 years worth of investigations, you don't believe you've witnessed or experienced anything that you would class as demonic.
No, and I think part of the reason is when I'm investigating a location, I do a very extensive research into the history, to the people's experiences and the phenomena that people have reported. And I have a very, very good interview questionnaire that I go through with people. And I can pretty much tell by what they're telling me or how they answer my questions. I can kind of get a feel, I believe, to what probably we're going to get involved with. And if it's something negative, okay, it doesn't have to be demonic, but something kind of negative. You could have a ghost that was a bad person in life, and it could be a bad person as a ghost. Why would I want to bring my team into a location where there's negativity? So we might pass on a case and maybe give it to somebody more seasoned, say in demonology, or maybe even say try to contact the clergy or something of this nature.
So you're not opposed to it. You don't disagree that it exists. You just don't want to have anything to do with it.
No, absolutely not. And I don't think too many people would be, except some of those TV shows.
Rachel?
Just going off how sort of frightening it would be if you went into somewhere that did happen to be a demonic entity. Have you ever had an experience on one of your investigations where you felt really genuine fear and you felt like you've had to leave, or have you always been quite sort of calm and feel like you're able to sort of deal with whatever's coming at you?
The latter. Basically, I don't think I've ever walked into a location with our team and actually felt threatened. I don't think we've actually been involved where we've been attacked or anything like that. I mean, being poked in the back or being brushed against or somebody grabbing my, you know what. That's fine. That's playful. I mean, I enjoyed it. I said, bring it on. I mean, I like to have those kind of reactions. But I mean, I think even if we did come across something like that, I think we would just stay there as long as we were not feeling threatened or feeling like there was some imminent danger involved. And we've never come across it. So I categorize ghosts into two basic main categories. One called the residual haunt, and one called the intelligent haunt. The residual haunt is more like a tape loop, something that is embedded in the fabric of time and space, some emotional trauma that took place, and is replayed over and over again. Somebody walking up the stairs, somebody being seen at the site where they died of a traffic accident.
Is that stone tape theory?
Yeah, exactly. And in those cases, I don't believe there's any real intelligence there. I think it's just the energies left behind by a trauma that people can see and experience. Now, the flip side of the coin is what I call the intelligent haunt, where there actually is a surviving personality. You see the ghost sees you. There's recognition between the two. You ask a question, they respond to the question. That's a little more on the rare side than like you say, the stone tape theory, or I call the residual haunt. But you want to basically try to differentiate very early on what you're dealing with. Is it something that you can interact with or not? I mean, even the residual haunt is still an amazing thing to see or have something like that happen. It could be, like in England, it could be centuries ago that this happened. There's reports in Hampton Court Palace of the sound of King Henry VIII dragging his gout-ridden foot. I think it's the right place. You hear that. You hear the screams of Anne Boleyn before she was being beheaded and so forth. And these go back thousands and thousands of years, and there's nothing that you could really, I don't think, communicate with. It's more like just some trauma.
I'm just going to ask you a question. This is a bit of a silly one, but I'll ask it anyway. You keep talking about how old our stuff is, which is all fair enough. When you watch these, Hollywood films and ghosty films, everything seems to be built on an ancient Indian burial ground. Have you investigated anything on an ancient Indian burial ground, and what is that like?
Well, you got to remember, here in the United States, every place is an Indian site, because this is what the Native Americans were before the Europeans came over, and it kind of invaded more or less and drove the Indians further and further west. So you could pretty much say that almost every place is an Indian burial ground. We have investigated many sites of Indian burial grounds, Robinson Woods Indian burial grounds, down at Starved Rock, Illinois, near Peru. Then out to Lake Shawnee Amusement Park in West Virginia, which was built on a Native American Indian ground. And in those cases, we've actually had some EVPs that we listened to later that we didn't hear at the time. So they weren't a disembodied voice. They were true EVP. That sounds like almost Native American drumming in the background. They're like tom-toms that we just didn't hear. We actually picked up, I think, one EVP that sounded like an Indian war whoop. So, yeah, I mean, they're all over the United States. I mean, you'd be hard pressed not to find some place that wasn't built on a Native American Indian burial ground, or maybe a settlement or an Indian village or something like that.
So, but not the ones that would make it specifically evil or something like that, because it's always in these films, it's always like, oh no, it's on an Indian burial ground, and therefore you just know there's something going to kick off. So
yeah, I mean, we've never had that happen to any of our team that we've been out there, but it's something that we we go to places in the United States that have a lot of history. I do a lot of Civil War battlefields, and Civil War battlefields is maybe a little bit different than Civil War in the UK. I mean, this was brother against brother for like 5 years, and I've been to Gettysburg several times, and Gettysburg is just an amazing place that we picked up so many what I believe to be residual. We were down in the triangular field, and we were using a ghost box. I'm sure you probably heard the term the ghost box. And suddenly this scream came through the ghost box very, very clearly. Says, "I'm shot." And I said, "Where were you shot?" So I, wanted to continue the conversation. And he actually responded and says, "In my eye." And we got these all on the website for people. You want to check out.
I'm sure people will make sure we put that link in so people can do that. You also went to some battle sites here in Britain, though. I think you went to Bannockburn and other places. Tell us about, what did you feel when you were at those places?
Well, I mean, when we went to Bannockburn, obviously it probably looked a lot different from what it was during William Wallace's time. It's kind of like, more park-like, a lot of rolling hills and everything. And we didn't get to Stirling Castle, but we saw it from a distance. That was one of the other battles that took place. I mean, there were thousands of people that died during the fight for Scotland's independence. And on a side note, I was actually able to go to Westminster Abbey and actually see the tomb of Longshanks, who was the King of England at the time. I guess they call him Longshanks. I was able to see that tomb, so I was able to kind of like tie up the I call it the Braveheart spots and sites. But I mean, I kind of got a feel more of, I don't consider myself to be a psychic, but doing all the places that I've been to, kind of like embeds itself upon you, that you begin to feel more. And I felt a lot of sadness there. I mean, really just a lot of sadness.
Yeah, I mean, that is the point, though, isn't it? Like, we go into these places that have a lot of emotional feeling, and that's why they say that, when you investigate hospitals or murder sites or whatever it might be, what has been the worst place like the one that you go, I can't stay here for any more, I have to get out?
I can't think of one off the top of my head that I actually would like to leave quickly.
Okay.
But there are some that we went back over and over again to places like Trans-Allegheny, to like Old South Pittsburgh Hospital in Tennessee, to Gettysburg, to other locations, because consistently we just get evidence at almost every single year. There have been a few times that when we were doing Bachelor's Grove Cemetery here in Chicago, it's just south of Chicago, where you're kind of walking down that quarter-mile trail to get to the cemetery out in the middle of the woods, and you get maybe halfway there, and all of a sudden you just get this feeling. I've got it a couple of times where maybe I shouldn't be here today. It doesn't feel right, So I would turn around and leave, because, I mean, this is kind of out in the middle of the woods. The thing is, I'm more scared about the real people out there in the middle of the woods than it would be ghosts.
Yeah, it's probably wise.
Rachel?
I was just wondering if you've ever experienced maybe bringing anything back with you. Have you ever sort of got back home and thought, has something followed me? Is there something here?
Yeah, do you do protection? A lot of them use protection, prayers and things?
We might say a prayer, or you surround yourself with white light or something like that. I actually have a blessed crucifix that I might bring along at this place that, it doesn't feel so, kind of feels ishy. I might bring that along. But I have, we were investigating a house that in Bartlett, Illinois, that had a lot of antiques. I mean, this woman was an antique collector, filled floor to ceiling with antiques, pretty much. and she was having all kind of strange things. Drawers being pulled out, silverware dumped on the floor. She would see this little boy come up to the edge of the stairs, and she thought it was her little boy who got out of bed and was sleepwalking. She jumped up, went to the bedroom, she's sound asleep. So she finally called our team in, and there was some really strange energy readings in that house with a lot of our equipment. And so we didn't do anything. I mean, we just did some EVP sessions and so forth, try to figure out what was going on. But we're not a ghost buster, so I don't go in there to try to remove the ghost. Okay, I just try to document what's there, and then if we need to do a follow-up, we can do follow-up. We can bring a psychic if we need to, or a medium. So we went back home, and a week or so later, she said, well, I feel that these two angel cherubs that I have at the center of the haunting, I was going to throw them away, but if you want, I will send them to you. And I said, well, let me think about that. I don't mind if I'm not like that too much.
Yeah.
But she did. She sent them to me. And the weirdest thing is I didn't open that box for 10 years. It's sat in my house. Almost immediately on the front porch, which I have an enclosed front porch, I'm sitting in my lazy boy watching TV, and I hear a thump on the window. I said, oh, maybe something fell against the window. Oh, there's nothing there. I was working the late shift, and my wife would be here until like 2 o'clock in the morning or something. And she was down there doing the laundry, and suddenly she heard footsteps upstairs, and she thought it was me coming in. So she, Dale, is that you? Nothing. And she, as soon as I came home, the first thing out of her mouth is, get rid of those damn angel cherubs. So we put them upstairs in the upstairs bedroom, and we would hear movements. We would hear footsteps. Our dog would stare up that stairs for the longest time, and I would say, Sandy. I almost had to shake the dog to kind of break the concentration because she saw something up there. Well, now the cherubs are in the garage. And I always wanted to do a kind of what I call a double-blind experiment, to get 3 boxes, marked A, B, and C, put the cherubs in one, blocks of wood in the other, give them to investigators to have a whole week, not telling them which ones had the cherubs, and write down your experiences, and at the end of the experiment, tell them which one had the cherubs.
So, yeah, that would be good.
So far, I haven't found 3 people who want to do it.
I mean, does that? I mean, I'm assuming therefore your house is not full of haunted dolls then.
No, but I do. But unfortunately, I do bring little pieces back of places I've been to. You know, a little scoop full of dirt, maybe like a little pebble, things of that nature. You know, I don't have any haunted dolls or demonic, Cerebell dolls or Annabelle dolls. Excuse me. But I do have little things I bring back from, I don't know if I call them souvenirs, but little places I've been to. And quite a bit from when I went to England. Found little just pieces of, something there, and I would bring it back. My wife goes, don't bring any more stuff back.
Especially not dolls.
Yeah, it's just dolls.
Not cherubs. Okay, we're going to finish up. Rachel, have you got anything else you'd like to ask Darby? So, I mean, literally, we could be talking for 3 or 4 hours here and probably days on end. So I'd really like to get you back here at some stage when we can actually maybe focus on a certain aspect of your experience. Rachel, was there anything else you'd like to ask?
I'd probably just like to ask if, after all these years of investigating, would you still say that you are a true believer in the supernatural?
Absolutely. I think it's, like I say, it's our life here on Earth is so short. It's 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever it is. Einstein said it very eloquently, energy cannot be created nor destroyed, it changes form. And there's a measurable energy in our bodies that can be measured with our equipment, biochemical energy. So when we die, what happens to that energy? Does it hang around in the form of a spirit or a ghost that people can interact with, or maybe an intelligent or residual? Or does it go to, say, heaven, hell, or purgatory, or whatever, or an altered state of consciousness? I really believe that, there is something to the idea that when we die, there is much more on the horizon for us.
Yeah.
And I think in some cases, I believe that some spirits, because of the way they die, tragically, untimely, they seem to stick around only because they don't realize that they have passed on. That's a very often repeated scenario in a lot of ghost hunters' theories.
Yeah.
Well, there's some more to think about. Like, I think we've talked about science and locations and all sorts of things, and we've really only just scratched the surface of your 50 years of paranormal investigation. So once again, Dale Kaczmarek, thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel. We'll be back next time on Spooky Owls, and in the meantime, make sure you do check out Dale's websites. We'll include them in the show notes and on the Spooky Owls, so people could hear more from you, Dale.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you very much, and we'll be talking next time. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Bye.